welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Or, I might show up at your door. I'm just here to share some creepy stories, so sit back and enjoy. Disclaimer: the content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. From the Journal of Jesse Coleman, radio technician at WMIL 97.3 FM, September 17th, started 3 days ago. A perfectly ordinary Tuesday in Millfield. Nothing special about the date, nothing remarkable about the weather, just the first hints of autumn touching the maple trees that line Main Street, their edges turning rusty gold against a clear blue sky. I was pulling the late shift at the station, which wasn't unusual. Night broadcasts have been my specialty for the past 3 years since I moved back to town after a failed attempt at making it in Chicago. I'm used to the solitude, the quiet hum of equipment, the gentle glow of monitors in an otherwise dark studio. There's a comfort in routine in the predictable nature of rural radio. At 11:42 p.m., I was queuing up the next segment, local weather, followed by a replay of Mayor Halsey's announcement about the upcoming Harvest Festival. When the emergency alert system activated unexpectedly, this in itself wasn't entirely abnormal. We run monthly tests, usually on the first Monday at noon, occasionally with additional surprise tests scheduled by the State Emergency Management Office. But this was different. There was no advance notification in the system, no email, no paperwork. Just the sudden override of our broadcast. I watched the text crawl across my screen, fingers hovering over keys that would do nothing until the automated system released control back to me. This is a test of the emergency alert system. This is only a test. If this had been an actual emergency, instructions would follow. This is only a test. Standard language, but the timing was wrong. I made a note to call the state coordinator in the morning to report the glitch. Probably some crossed wire or software update gone sideways somewhere in the system. When you work with technology long enough, you learn that most unexplained occurrences have mundane explanations. The test concluded, and I went back to my playlist. The overnight hours stretched on, the same as always. I finished my shift at 6 a.m., handed over to morning host Darla Winters, and drove home through the quiet streets of Millfield as the sun began to rise. I didn't think about the alert again until I woke up that evening around 5 p.m. My phone had several missed calls, all from the station manager, Frank Wilkins. I called him back immediately. "Jesse, did you file a report about last night's activation?" Frank asked without preamble. "I was going to mention it today. It was just a test message, but the timing was off." "That's the thing," Frank said, his voice tight with concern. "I called the state coordinator. They have no record of scheduling a test. None of the other stations in the county reported receiving it." That gave me pause. The emergency alert system doesn't just activate for a single station. It's designed to cascade across the broadcast network. Could be equipment malfunction? I suggested. "Maybe," Frank said, not sounding convinced. "Look, just document everything carefully tonight, all right? Any alerts, any system anomalies. I've got a technician coming out tomorrow to check the equipment." I agreed and ended the call, an uneasy feeling settling in my stomach. Something about the whole situation felt wrong, though I couldn't articulate why. Just one of those gut feelings you get sometimes, the primitive part of your brain picking up on something your conscious mind hasn't processed yet. I arrived at the station early that night, around 9 p.m., 2 hours before my shift. I wanted to check the system logs, see if there was any indication of where the test alert had originated. The building was empty except for Ellie Hayes, who hosts the evening talk show. She waved at me through the studio glass as I passed, her headphones on as she fielded calls from locals about everything from school board politics to favorite pie recipes. The logs showed nothing unusual, just the standard entry showing the EAS activation, but no source identifier. It was as if the system had decided on its own to run a test, which is theoretically impossible. I was still combing through diagnostic menus when Ellie popped her head into the control room. "Anything weird in your system?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Not really." "Why?" "I've had 3 callers tonight mention getting emergency alerts on their phones today. But when I checked mine, there's nothing." "What kind of alerts?" I asked, feeling that uneasiness return. Ellie shrugged. "That's just it. They were all vague. Something about staying aware of surroundings, testing emergency protocols." Nobody could remember the exact wording, just that they seemed off somehow. I made a mental note to keep an eye on the news feeds. Sometimes the National Weather Service would push alerts for severe weather, but the sky outside was clear, stars visible through the control room's small window. Ellie's show wrapped up, and I took over at midnight. The first hour was uneventful, just music and the occasional station identification. At precisely 1:17 a.m., the system activated again. This time, I was watching as it happened. The message that appeared on my screen wasn't the standard test language. It read, "Emergency alert. Remain in your homes. Do not open your doors for any reason. This is not a test. Further information to follow. Remain in your homes. Do not open your doors." The message broadcast and then control returned to me. I immediately called Frank, who sounded groggy when he answered. "There's been another alert," I told him. "This one isn't a test." "What's the emergency?" he asked. "It doesn't say. Just telling people to stay home and not open their doors." "That can't be right," Frank said, sounding more awake now. "Is there severe weather? Chemical spill?" "Nothing on any of the news feeds." "Call Sheriff Mercer," Frank instructed. "I'll try my contact at emergency management." I hung up and dialed the sheriff's office. The dispatcher, a bored-sounding woman I didn't recognize, informed me that Sheriff Mercer was out on a call, but there were no emergencies in progress that would warrant such an alert. "We'd know if there was," she said firmly. "Probably another glitch in your system." I wasn't convinced. An equipment malfunction might explain a test message playing at the wrong time, but not a completely different, specific warning. Something about the alert's language sent chills down my spine. The repetition, the emphasis on keeping doors closed, it felt deliberate, almost desperate. I spent the rest of my shift monitoring news sites and social media, looking for any mention of emergencies in the region. Nothing. Not a whisper of anything that would explain the alert. By the time Darla arrived to take over, I was exhausted and irritable. "Rough night?" she asked, setting down her travel mug. "Equipment issues," I said, not wanting to worry her unnecessarily. "Frank's getting someone to look at it today." I drove home through the silent streets of Millfield, the sun just beginning to lighten the eastern sky. As I pulled into my driveway, my headlights swept across my front porch. For a fraction of a second, I thought I saw someone standing there, a dark silhouette against my front door. I blinked, and the porch was empty. Just a trick of the light, I told myself as I unlocked my door. Just fatigue playing tricks on my mind. But as I stepped inside and locked the door behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, had been waiting for me to come home. I drew the curtains closed before collapsing into bed, the alert's words echoing in my mind as I drifted into uneasy sleep. "Do not open your doors for any reason." September 18th. I woke to the insistent buzz of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. The screen showed it was just past noon. I'd managed about 5 hours of fitful sleep. 3 missed calls from Ellie, 2 from Frank, and 1 from a number I didn't recognize. Before I could return any of them, the phone vibrated in my hand. Ellie again. "You need to turn on your TV," she said as soon as I answered, her voice tight with anxiety. "What's going on?" I asked, fumbling for the remote. "Channel 8. They're talking about what happened last night." I flipped to the local news and saw a reporter standing outside the sheriff's office. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read, "Mysterious emergency alert causes confusion in Millfield County. Residents reported receiving the unauthorized alert around 1:17 this morning," the reporter was saying. "Officials state there was no emergency and are investigating the source of the false alarm. Sheriff's Department spokesman advised that residents should disregard the message. The camera cut to Sheriff Dana Mercer, her weathered face set in lines of annoyed determination. "We've had over 30 calls since this morning about this so-called alert," she said. "I want to assure everyone that there is no emergency situation in Millfield County. We're working with state authorities to identify whoever is responsible for this irresponsible prank." "They're saying it's a hoax," I said to Ellie. "That's not all," she replied. "People have been calling the station all morning. Did Frank tell you? I just woke up. Haven't checked messages yet." "Jesse, people all over town reported knocking on their doors last night. After the alert, I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach." "What kind of knocking?" "Regular at first, then irregular, insistent. And here's the weird part. It happened between 3 and 4 a.m. all over town. Different houses, different neighborhoods, all around the same time." "Did anyone answer?" Ellie hesitated before answering. "Mrs. Davenport on Elm Street says she did. She thought it was her son. He sometimes locks himself out when he comes home late from his shift at the hospital. She says she opened the door and no one was there. Just emptiness. Not even crickets or night sounds. That's it." "No." She says when she tried to close the door, she couldn't move for a few seconds, like her body wasn't responding. Then she managed to slam it shut and locked it. She called her son right after. He was still at work. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to process this information. "Anyone else open their doors?" "Not that I've heard. Most people were spooked enough by the alert to stay put." "But Jesse, this isn't just 1 or 2 people reporting this. It's all over town." I promised Ellie I'd meet her at the diner in an hour, then showered and dressed quickly. Before leaving, I checked the local Facebook groups where my neighbors share everything from lost pet notices to complaints about road construction. They were flooded with posts about the alert and the knocking. One post in particular caught my attention. "Did anyone else hear voices with the knocking? It sounded exactly like my daughter calling for help, but she was asleep in her room the whole time. I almost opened the door before I remembered the alert. This wasn't just knocking. Whatever it was knew how to sound like someone I'd let in." The comment section was filled with similar accounts, people reporting the sounds of loved ones' voices, some even claiming to have heard deceased relatives calling to them from outside. By the time I reached Miller's Diner, my unease had deepened into genuine dread. Ellie was already there, nursing a cup of coffee in our usual booth by the window. The diner was busier than usual for a late afternoon, buzzing with conversations all centered around the previous night's events. "Frank's furious," Ellie said without preamble as I slid into the seat across from her. "The FCC called him this morning. They're threatening to investigate the station for broadcasting a false emergency." "But we didn't initiate it," I protested. "The system was triggered externally. Try telling them that." "The technician came by this morning and found nothing wrong with our equipment. No sign of tampering, no software glitches." "That's impossible. Something triggered those alerts." Ellie leaned forward, lowering her voice. "That's not all. I talked to Jimmy at the phone company. The mobile alerts didn't come through the standard emergency channels either. It's like they just appeared on people's phones." I was about to respond when the diner door opened and Sheriff Mercer walked in. The conversations around us dimmed momentarily before resuming with renewed intensity. Mercer scanned the room, her gaze settling on our table. After ordering coffee at the counter, she made her way over to us. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, though she was already sliding into the booth next to Ellie. "Sheriff," I nodded. "I'm guessing this isn't a social call." "You'd be right about that," she said, her expression grim. "I understand the alert last night originated from your station. It came through our system, but we didn't send it," I explained. "Something or someone triggered the EAS. And you have no idea who that might be?" she asked skeptically. "None. I was there when it happened. The system just activated on its own." Sheriff Mercer sipped her coffee, studying me over the rim of her mug. You know what I think? I think someone's playing an elaborate prank. Get everyone worked up with a spooky message, then go around knocking on doors in the middle of the night. Whole towns in a panic over nothing. People are saying they heard voices," Ellie interjected. "Voices of people they know." "Mass hysteria," Mercer replied dismissively. "One person mentions hearing something. Suddenly everyone's hearing things. You work in radio, Ms. Hayes. You know how suggestion works." "What about Mrs. Davenport?" I asked. "She says she couldn't move after opening her door." Sheriff Mercer's expression flickered briefly, something like concern crossing her features before she regained her composure. "Mrs. Davenport is 82 years old and lives alone. She likely had a minor stroke or a moment of vertigo. My deputy took her to see Dr. Patel this morning. And," Ellie pressed, "and nothing. She's fine. Doctor said her blood pressure was a bit high, but that's to be expected given her age and the stress of thinking someone was trying to break in." I wasn't convinced, and from Ellie's expression, neither was she. Something about Sheriff Mercer's explanation felt rehearsed, as if she was working too hard to normalize what had happened. "What about tonight?" I asked. "If it is pranksters, they might try again." "I've got extra patrols out already," Mercer assured us. "Anyone caught disturbing the peace will spend the night in a cell." She finished her coffee and stood. "In the meantime, I'd appreciate it if you two wouldn't add fuel to the fire. The last thing we need is panic based on rumors." After the sheriff left, Ellie and I exchanged looks. "She knows more than she's saying," Ellie murmured. "Agreed," I said. "But what?" The rest of the day passed in a blur of speculation. I returned home to catch a few more hours of sleep before my shift, but rest eluded me. I kept thinking about the alert, the knocking, the voices people reported hearing. When I arrived at the station that evening, Frank was waiting in my studio, a man in a dark suit beside him. "Jesse, this is Raymond Chun," Frank said, an edge of nervousness in his voice. "He's with the Department of Homeland Security. He'd like to ask you some questions about last night's incident." Agent Chun didn't smile as he extended his hand. His grip was cold and firm. "Mr. Coleman," he said, his voice oddly flat, "I understand you were the only one present when the unauthorized alert was broadcast. I'd like you to tell me exactly what you saw." As I recounted the events, I couldn't shake the feeling that Chun already knew the answers to the questions he was asking. He nodded periodically, taking notes in a small black notebook, his pen moving with mechanical precision. "And you're certain no one else was in the building?" he asked for the third time. "Just Ellie, but she left before the alert came through." "I see." Chun closed his notebook. "You should know, Mr. Coleman, that broadcasting false emergency messages is a federal offense. If this turns out to be some kind of publicity stunt for your station, it's not," I interrupted, anger flaring. "I've told you everything I know." Chun studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes revealing nothing. "For now, continue your normal operations. If another alert comes through, do not attempt to override it. Contact me immediately." He handed me a card with only a phone number printed on it. After Chun and Frank left, I sat alone in the quiet studio, turning the card over in my fingers. Why would a Homeland Security agent be interested in a small-town emergency alert malfunction? And why did he want me to let the alerts play if they came through again? As I prepared for the night's broadcast, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I kept glancing at the darkened windows, half expecting to see a face peering in from the blackness outside. At exactly 9:42 p.m., my phone vibrated with an incoming message. An emergency alert. Emergency update. Remain in your homes tonight. Do not acknowledge any attempts at contact after midnight. Do not open your doors for any reason. My finger hovered over the screen, Chen's business card on the desk beside me. Outside the station, darkness gathered like a living thing, pressing against the windows, waiting. From the Journal of Jesse Coleman, radio technician at WMIL 97.3 FM, September 19th. I didn't call Agent Chun last night. I should have, but something held me back. An instinct, perhaps, or just plain suspicion. Instead, I took a screenshot of the alert and continued my broadcast as if nothing had happened. If Chun was monitoring our station, and I strongly suspected he would know about the alert anyway. The rest of my shift passed without incident, though the usual call-ins for late-night song requests were non-existent. It seemed the entire town of Millfield was holding its breath, waiting behind locked doors. When I left the station at 6 a.m., the morning sky was heavy with fog, transforming the familiar streets into something alien and indistinct. I drove home slowly, eyes darting to the sidewalks and between houses, searching for what? I wasn't sure, but the alert's warning echoed in my mind. Do not acknowledge any attempts at contact after midnight. Had there been knocking again last night? The town seemed unnaturally quiet, even for early morning. I was nearly home when I spotted Sheriff Mercer's cruiser parked outside the Peterson place on Oak Street. 2 other patrol cars were there as well, their lights cutting silently through the mist. I hesitated, then pulled over. Sheriff Mercer was on the front lawn, speaking with a deputy. She frowned when she saw me approaching. "This isn't a good time, Coleman," she said, moving to intercept me. "What happened?" I asked, trying to see past her to the house. The front door was open, officers moving in and out. "Nothing that concerns you or your radio station." Her tone was clipped, but I could see the strain around her eyes, the tightness in her jaw. Was it like Mrs. Davenport? Did someone open their door? Mercer's expression hardened. "You need to leave. Now." Before I could respond, a commotion from the house drew our attention. 2 paramedics emerged, carrying a stretcher between them. On it lay a shape covered completely by a white sheet. "Is that Richard Peterson?" I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. Mercer didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. Richard Peterson, the high school biology teacher, was dead. "Sheriff?" I pressed, lowering my voice. "People have a right to know what's happening." "If there's danger." "What's happening," she interrupted, "is a tragic accident. Richard Peterson fell down his stairs. Nothing more." "In the middle of the night?" After 2 emergency alerts telling people not to open their doors. Mercer stepped closer, her voice barely audible. "Go home, Jesse. Lock your doors. Stay away from your windows after dark." Her eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw raw fear there. "That's not a suggestion." She turned and walked back to the house without another word, leaving me standing on the sidewalk as the paramedics loaded Peterson's body into the ambulance. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. Richard Peterson was no frail, elderly resident like Mrs. Davenport. He was in his 40s, healthy and athletic, the coach of the high school track team. People like that don't just fall downstairs. Sleep eluded me despite my exhaustion. I kept thinking about Mercer's warning, about the fear in her eyes. Whatever was happening in Millfield, the authorities knew more than they were saying. Around noon, I gave up on rest and called Ellie. "Did you hear about Richard Peterson?" she asked as soon as she picked up. "I was there when they brought his body out. Sheriff saying he fell down the stairs." "That's not what I heard," Ellie said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "My cousin works as a receptionist at the hospital. She says they brought Peterson in with no visible injuries. No trauma, no signs of a heart attack or stroke. He was just dead." "How is that possible?" "It gets weirder." She overheard Dr. Patel telling someone that Peterson's body was empty. Empty? What does that mean? "I don't know." That's all she heard before a nurse spotted her and shooed her away. "But Jesse, I've been digging around online. Millfield isn't the only place getting these alerts." My pulse quickened. "Where else?" "Reports are scattered, but I found mentions in forums from at least 3 other small towns. One in Nebraska, one in Vermont, and one in Oregon. Same pattern. Unexplained emergency alerts, knocking at night, and then people disappearing or turning up dead." I sat down heavily on my couch. "Have you told anyone else about this?" "Who would I tell? The sheriff thinks it's all pranks and accidents, and that government agent would probably just confiscate my laptop if he knew I was looking into this. She was right. We were on our own with this, at least for now. I need to check something at the station, I told her. The EAS logs might have more information about where these alerts are coming from. Be careful, Ellie cautioned. If Agent Chun is watching the station, I'll say I forgot something from my shift. I'll call you later. The station was quiet when I arrived. Just the afternoon DJ, Marcus, in the booth. He waved at me through the glass as I headed to the technical room where our EAS equipment was housed. I spent an hour going through logs and settings, looking for any clue about the source of the alerts. The system showed the messages had come through the standard federal channels, which made no sense. If these were unauthorized alerts, they shouldn't be able to access those secure pathways, unless they weren't unauthorized. Unless someone with access to the federal emergency system was sending them. I was copying the log files to a USB drive when my phone buzzed with a text from Ellie. Found something. Get to my place now. Don't tell anyone where you're going. 20 minutes later, I was at Ellie's small bungalow on the edge of town. She ushered me in quickly, checking the street before closing and locking the door. Look at this, she said, leading me to her dining room table where her laptop was open. On the screen was a grainy image from what appeared to be someone's security camera. It showed a residential street at night, empty except for a single figure standing motionless on the sidewalk. This is from the Herbert's place on Maple, Ellie explained. Mrs. Herbert posted it on the neighborhood watch group before it was taken down. About 10 minutes after she posted it. Taken down by whom? She didn't say. Just that someone called and told her to remove it. But I saved it first. Ellie tapped a key and the video began to play. The figure stood completely still for nearly 30 seconds. Then, with movements that were both too fluid and too angular to seem natural, it turned toward the camera and began walking toward the house. Watch its face, Ellie whispered. As the figure drew closer, I could make out its features in the dim glow of the street light. It looked like a man in his 30s, ordinary in every way except for his complete lack of expression and the unnatural smoothness of his gait. Then, as it reached the edge of the Herbert's yard, its face shifted. There's no other word for it. The features seemed to flow like wax, reforming into a different configuration. The face of Bill Herbert, the homeowner. What the hell? I breathed. It gets worse, Ellie said, advancing the video. The thing with Bill Herbert's face approached the front door and raised its hand to knock. But before it made contact, something strange happened. Paused, head cocked as if listening, then turned to look directly at the camera. Its face shifted again, but not to another human visage. The features seemed to melt away entirely, leaving something smooth and featureless, with only the suggestion of where eyes should be. The video ended abruptly. Mrs. Herbert wrote that after this, their camera system crashed, Ellie said. They didn't answer the door, thank God. Have you shown this to Sheriff Mercer? No. After seeing this, I don't know who to trust anymore. I stared at the frozen image on the screen, the featureless face seeming to stare back at me. We need to warn people. If these things can look like anyone, that's why I texted you, Ellie said. You have access to the radio station. We can broadcast a warning. They'll just override it like they did with my regular broadcast when the S kicked in, I pointed out. Not if we don't use the main system. The old emergency transmitter in the backup studio. It operates on a different frequency. It's not connected to the EAS. She was right. The station maintained an ancient but functional transmitter for use in case of power outages or equipment failures. It had limited range, but it would reach most of Millfield. Tonight, I decided, during my shift, I'll find a reason to use the backup studio. As I left Ellie's house, I glanced up and down the quiet street, suddenly aware of how exposed I was. The afternoon sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon, casting long shadows between the houses. In less than 6 hours, it would be dark again, and whatever was out there wearing familiar faces would be knocking. From the Journal of Jesse Coleman, radio technician at WMIL 97.3 FM. September 19th evening. The station felt different when I arrived for my shift. Quieter somehow, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Marcus was packing up his things, eyes darting nervously to the windows as twilight settled over Millfield. "Quiet day?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," he replied, not meeting my gaze. "No calls, barely any texts. It's like the whole town's gone silent." I nodded, unsurprised. Fear had settled over Millfield like a heavy blanket, smothering the usual rhythms of small-town life. "Listen," Marcus said, lowering his voice though we were alone in the studio. "I'm not scheduled until Monday, but I don't think I'm coming back." "What? Why?" He glanced at the door, then back to me. "My sister lives in Lakewood. I'm heading there tonight. You should get out too, Jesse." "I can't just leave," I protested, though the idea was tempting. "Something bad is happening here," Marcus insisted. "I don't know what it is, but I'm not sticking around to find out." Before I could respond, the station's front door opened. Agent Chun walked in, followed by a woman I didn't recognize. Tall, severe-looking, with short gray hair and the same flat effect as Chun. "Mr. Coleman," Chun nodded to me, then turned to Marcus. "You must be Marcus Delaney. I need to speak with both of you." Marcus froze, his face draining of color. I was just leaving. End of my shift." "This won't take long," Chun said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. He gestured to the woman beside him. "This is Dr. Weiss. She's a specialist with our agency." "What agency is that exactly?" I asked, emboldened by the growing certainty that whatever was happening, the government knew about it. Chun ignored my question. "We understand there have been some unusual occurrences in Millfield the past few days." "You mean the emergency alerts you told me to ignore?" I challenged. "Or the people turning up dead after something knocks on their doors at night?" A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossed Chen's face before his expression smoothed out again. "We're aware of the alerts. That's why we're here." "Richard Peterson is dead," I pressed. "Sheriff Mercer is saying he fell down the stairs, but that's not what happened, is it?" Chun and Dr. Weiss exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. Then Weiss stepped forward, her movements oddly precise. "Mr. Coleman, Mr. Delaney, we need your cooperation to prevent further incidents," she said, her voice clinical and detached. "This situation is more complex than you realize." "Then explain it to us," I demanded. "I'm afraid we can't disclose the full details at this time," Chun interjected. "What we need now is for you to continue broadcasting as normal, but with one modification." He handed me a sealed envelope. "This message should be read on air at the start of your broadcast, and again every hour." I took the envelope but didn't open it. "What is it?" "Additional emergency instructions for the residents of Millfield." Marcus had been silent throughout this exchange, but now he spoke up, his voice trembling slightly. "Are we in danger? Should we be evacuating?" Dr. Weiss's gaze fixed on him with an intensity that made me uneasy. "Evacuation would be inadvisable at this time. The safest course of action is to follow the instructions in that envelope and to remain indoors after dark, just like the alerts have been saying," I noted. "Yes," Chun confirmed. "Those alerts, while not issued through official channels, contain valid safety instructions." Something about his phrasing caught my attention. "Not issued through official channels." Yet the system logs showed they came through federal pathways. Either Chun was lying or he didn't have the full picture either. "We'll be monitoring tonight's broadcast," Weiss added, her eyes never leaving Marcus. "We expect full compliance." After they left, Marcus turned to me, panic evident in his eyes. "I'm not staying here, Jesse. I don't care what they say." "Wait," I cautioned, placing a hand on his arm. "Let me see what's in this envelope first." I tore it open and unfolded a single sheet of paper. The message was brief. "Attention residents of Millfield. Due to an ongoing security situation, A curfew is now in effect from sunset to sunrise. All residents must remain in their homes during these hours. Any individuals observed outdoors after dark will be subject to immediate quarantine procedures. Do not attempt to leave town. Road closures are in effect on all routes in and out of Millfield County. This is a matter of national security. Further instructions will follow. I handed it to Marcus, watching as his face crumpled in despair. "They're trapping us here," he whispered. "Maybe," I conceded, "but they're also scared of whatever's out there." I glanced at the clock. 20 minutes until my broadcast was scheduled to begin. "Look, go home. Lock your doors, stay away from your windows. I'll figure something out." After Marcus left, I sent a quick text to Ellie. "Government agents at station. Gave me message to broadcast. Curfew, road closures. Don't come here." Her reply was immediate. "Too late. In the parking lot now." I rushed to the back door, ushering Ellie in quickly. "Are you crazy? Chun and some doctor are watching the station." "I parked behind the dumpsters," she assured me. "No one saw me." "Did you say a doctor?" "Dr. Weiss. Gray hair, creepy vibe. Said she's a specialist." Ellie's expression turned grim. "We need to check something." She pulled out her phone and opened a photo. "Is this her?" The image showed a younger version of Dr. Weiss, standing in what appeared to be a laboratory. The photo quality was poor, clearly enlarged from a group shot. "That's her," I confirmed. "Where did you get this?" "It was in an article I found archived from 2012. A classified research project called Threshold. The article was scrubbed from the web almost immediately, but someone had saved it on a conspiracy forum." "What kind of research?" Ellie took a deep breath. "Theoretical applications of quantum mechanics to cross-dimensional barriers." I stared at her. "In English, please." "They were trying to create gateways to other dimensions, Jesse. And according to this article, they succeeded, but something came through. Something that could adapt its appearance." A chill ran down my spine as I recalled the security footage from the Herbert's house. The figure with the face that shifted and changed. "You think these things, whatever they are, came from another dimension, and the government knows about them?" "I think the government either let them in or can't get rid of them," Ellie said grimly. "And now they're here in Millfield." I glanced at the clock again. 5 minutes until broadcast time. "I have to go on air." "Are you going to read their message?" I hesitated. If Chun was monitoring the broadcast, defying his instructions could make things worse. But the people of Millfield deserved the truth, or at least as much of it as we knew. "I'll read it," I decided. "But afterward, while the playlist is running, we're going to the backup studio. We need to get a warning out on the emergency frequency." As I settled into the main studio and prepared for the broadcast, a movement outside the window caught my eye. A figure stood in the parking lot, motionless in the gathering darkness. For a moment, I thought it was Agent Chun. Then the figure turned, and in the dim glow of the security light, I saw its face, or rather, the absence of a face. Just a smooth, blank surface where features should be. It raised a hand, pressing it against the glass in a parody of a wave. I recoiled, nearly knocking over my chair. When I looked again, the parking lot was empty. "Jesse!" Ellie's voice came through my headphones. She was in the control room watching me with concern. "You okay?" "You went white as a sheet." "I'm fine," I lied, forcing myself to focus on the control panel. "Just tired." As I began the broadcast, reading Chen's curfew announcement in a voice I barely recognized as my own, I couldn't shake the feeling that I just glimpsed our future. Featureless, alien, and inevitable. The question wasn't whether these things would get in. The question was whether they were already among us. From the Journal of Jesse Coleman, radio technician at WMIL 97.3 FM, September 19th night. My hands trembled as I read the government's curfew announcement, the words feeling like ashes in my mouth. Between tracks, I glanced nervously at the window where I'd seen the faceless figure, half expecting to find it pressed against the glass again. The parking lot remained empty, but that provided little comfort. I knew now that emptiness could be deceptive. After finishing the announcement, I queued up a long playlist. Enough music to give Ellie and me about 40 minutes. We slipped out of the main studio and made our way to the station's basement, where the old emergency equipment was stored. The backup studio was little more than a glorified closet. A small room with soundproofing panels haphazardly attached to the walls, a basic mixing board, and the old transmitter that resembled a relic from the Cold War. A layer of dust covered everything, evidence of how rarely this equipment was used. "Will it work?" Ellie asked as I began checking connections and power supplies. "It should," I said, not entirely convinced. "We test it quarterly, but it's been at least 6 months since anyone's actually broadcast from down here." I flipped the power switch, and the ancient equipment hummed to life, lights flickering across the control panel. Relief washed over me as the signal meter jumped, indicating the transmitter was operational. "How far will this reach?" Ellie asked, helping me adjust the microphone stand. "Maybe 15 miles if we're lucky. Enough to cover Millfield and some of the outlying areas." I checked the time. "We have about 30 minutes before anyone might notice the broadcast. Let's make it count." Ellie had prepared notes based on everything we knew so far: the alerts, the knocking, the faceless visitors, Dr. Weiss's connection to the Threshold Project. As I reviewed them, a realization struck me. "Wait," I said. "We need to be careful about how we frame this. If we tell people there are shape-shifting entities walking around town, they'll think we're insane. So what do we say? We stick to facts. The alerts are real. People have died. The government is hiding something." I hesitated. "And we warn them about the signs. The knocking, the voices of loved ones, anyone acting strange." Ellie nodded. "And Richard Peterson? Mrs. Davenport? We tell people what we know, but we're clear about what's speculation." I took a deep breath. "Let's do this." I switched on the microphone and began. "This is Jesse Coleman from WMIL, broadcasting on the emergency frequency. This is not an official emergency alert, but what I'm about to tell you is critical for everyone in Millfield." For the next 20 minutes, we laid out everything we knew, everything we suspected. I described the alerts, the knocking, the figure I'd seen in the parking lot. Ellie explained her research into similar incidents in other towns and the connection to the Threshold Project. "We don't know exactly what's happening," I concluded, "but we do know this. Do not open your doors at night. Do not respond to anyone who calls you by name after dark, even if they sound like someone you know. And most importantly, if you notice anyone acting strange, moving oddly, speaking in unusual patterns, or showing no emotion, stay away from them." I ended the broadcast with a promise to transmit again the following evening, if possible, with any new information we discovered. As I switched off the equipment, Ellie's phone buzzed with a notification. She checked it, her expression darkening. "What is it?" I asked. "The town's Facebook group is blowing up. People are saying the Kellerman family is missing." "The whole family?" "Apparently. Their neighbors realized they hadn't seen them since yesterday morning. Someone went to check and found their house empty. No signs of struggle. Cars still in the garage. Phones left behind. A knot formed in my stomach. Like they just vanished. Or were taken," Ellie whispered. We made our way back upstairs, the implications of what we'd just done. Defying the government's instructions, broadcasting unauthorized warnings, settling heavily on my shoulders. The main studio was as we'd left it, the playlist still running smoothly. "We should get out of here," I said, checking the time. "If Chun is monitoring the regular broadcast, he might not have noticed our emergency transmission, but I don't want to risk." The studio door swung open, and Sheriff Mercer stepped in. Alone. For a moment, we all stood frozen. I tensed, ready to run, wondering if the sheriff had heard our broadcast, if she was here to arrest us, or worse, if she wasn't Sheriff Mercer at all, but one of them. "You too," she said finally, her voice low and strained, "are playing a very dangerous game." "Sheriff," I began, "we can explain." "Save it." She closed the door behind her and approached us, her movements deliberately slow. I heard your broadcast. Half the town probably heard it. Then you know why we did it, Ellie said defiantly. Mercer sighed, suddenly looking older than her 50-some years. You have no idea what you're dealing with. We know about Threshold, I countered. We know about Dr. Weiss and whatever came through from wherever they opened a door to. You know fragments, Mercer corrected. Pieces of a puzzle you can't possibly understand. Then help us understand, Ellie pleaded. People are dying, Sheriff. The Kellerman family is missing. How many more before you tell us the truth? Something shifted in Mercer's expression, a crack in her professional facade. The Kellermans aren't missing, she said quietly. They're at the community center, along with about 30 other people who reported contact. Contact, I echoed. Prolonged exposure to the entities, Mercer explained. The Kellermans had something knocking on their doors and windows all night on Tuesday. By morning, they were different, not immediately noticeable, but enough that their neighbors reported concerns. Different how? Ellie pressed. Flat effect, unusual speech patterns, memory gaps. Mercer's hand drifted to her holster, an unconscious gesture that sent alarm bells ringing in my head. We're keeping them contained until Dr. Weiss can determine if they're compromised. You mean if they're still human? I said, the words leaving a bitter taste. Mercer didn't deny it. The quarantine was Chen's idea. Contain the town, isolate the affected individuals, prevent spread. Spread of what? Ellie demanded. What exactly are these things? They don't have a name, not one we know, Mercer said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. They came through during an experiment at the Threshold facility in Nevada 4 years ago. First, it was just one, then more. They replace people, take their forms, their memories, but not perfectly. There are always tells. Like what? I asked, thinking of the faceless figure in the parking lot. Repetitive phrases, lack of emotional response. And they can't create their own faces. They need to copy from someone they've seen. So the knocking, the voices, Ellie began. They're trying to get you to open your doors, to show your face so they can copy it. Mercer's expression hardened. And they're getting better at it. The first wave could only manage crude approximations. Now they can mimic almost perfectly, except for the emotional responses. Why are you telling us this? I asked, suspicion creeping in. If Chun finds out, Chun doesn't speak for all of us, Mercer cut in. Some of us think the containment strategy is failing. People deserve to know what they're up against. And what about the emergency alerts? Pressed. Who's sending those? Mercer shook her head. That's the thing we don't know. The first one came through before Chun even arrived in town. He thought it was a local who knew something. A chill ran down my spine. If neither the government nor locals were sending the alerts, then who or what was warning us? Sheriff, Ellie said hesitantly. How do we know you're you? Mercer's mouth twisted in what might have been a smile. You don't, but I'm still carrying my service weapon, and if I wanted to hurt you, we wouldn't be having this conversation. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is a list of everyone we've quarantined so far. Memorize it, then burn it. If anyone on this list contacts you, don't engage. As I took the paper, a shrill alarm blared from Mercer's radio. Dispatch, go ahead, she responded immediately. The voice that came through was breathless. Panicked? Sheriff, we've got a situation at the community center. The quarantine's been breached. There, the transmission cut off in a burst of static. Mercer's face went pale. Both of you go home. Lock your doors. Block your windows. She turned to leave, then paused. And if you broadcast again, tell people to look for the eyes. The entities, their eyes don't track movement right. They look at where you were, not where you are. With that, she was gone, leaving Ellie and me alone in the suddenly too quiet studio. What do we do now? Ellie whispered. I looked down at the list in my hand, at the names of people who might no longer be people at all. We warn everyone, I said. And then we find out who or what is sending those alerts. From the Journal of Jesse Coleman, radio technician at WMIL 97.3 FM, September 20th, early morning. I haven't slept in over 30 hours. The emergency alerts blared 3 more times throughout the night. Each one identical. Emergency alert. Do not open your doors for any reason. But the last alert added something new. A string of numbers that repeated twice before cutting to static. When I wrote them down and showed them to Ellie over video chat, her face went pale. "Those are coordinates," she said. "They point to somewhere just outside town, near the old Blackridge Trail." After Sheriff Mercer's revelation about the community center breach, the town descended into chaos. Cell service became spotty at best, and the local social media groups filled with frantic posts before going eerily silent around 2 a.m. The last update from the town's emergency management page simply read, "Shelter in place. Further instructions pending." I've been holed up in my apartment with chairs braced against the door and sheets taped over the windows. The knocking started around midnight, soft at first, almost hesitant, then growing more insistent. 3 distinct patterns. Regular intervals, then rapid succession, then a slow, deliberate rhythm that made my skin crawl. Then came the voices. "Jesse? It's me, Jesse. Please let me in." It sounded exactly like my brother Mark. The same inflection, the same slight rasp from years of smoking. But Mark lives in Seattle, over 2,000 miles away. I recorded everything on my phone, the knocking, the voices, and what came after. When I played it back this morning, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The voice calling my name had no echo in the hallway, no ambient sound at all, as if it wasn't really there. But the most disturbing part was what I captured around 3:17 a.m. When I enhance the audio and slow it down, there's something else underneath the voice. A series of clicks and whirs, almost mechanical, but with an organic quality that defies description. Like the sound of insect mandibles amplified and distorted. I'm attaching the cleaned up recording to this journal entry. I don't know if anyone will ever read this, but if they do, they need to hear it for themselves. After reviewing the recording dozens of times, I decided to set up my camera to capture whatever was at my door. I positioned it on a shelf facing the peephole, set it to night vision mode, and let it run. For hours, nothing happened. Then, at 4:23 a.m., the knocking resumed. Looking at the footage now makes me question everything I thought I knew about reality. There's something at my door. It has a human silhouette, but the proportions are subtly wrong, limbs slightly too long, movements too fluid yet simultaneously jerky, as if it's still learning how to operate its form. Its face is what haunts me most. At first glance, it looks human, but when it turns toward the peephole, does it know I'm watching? There's a moment where the features slip, like a mask not properly attached, revealing glimpses of something underneath that my mind refuses to fully process. And just as Sheriff Mercer warned, its eyes never quite look directly at anything. They drift and lag, focusing on points in space that seem random until you realize they're tracking movement that happened seconds ago. I've watched the footage frame by frame. In one split-second image, what should be a human face is nothing but a blank canvas with crude approximations of features, like a child's drawing come to horrifying life. I sent the video to Ellie through an encrypted file share service. Her response came back as a single text, "Coming over. Don't open the door until you confirm it's me." When Ellie arrived around 8 a.m., I made her stand in front of my door while I verified her identity through a series of childhood memories only she would know. I watched her eyes carefully. They tracked my movements naturally, focusing on me in real time. Once inside, she showed me what she'd brought. Printouts of everything she could find on Threshold before the internet connection in her apartment cut out completely. The project started as a quantum communications experiment, she explained, spreading papers across my kitchen table. But something went wrong or right depending on your perspective. They didn't just create a communication channel. They opened a doorway. To where? I asked, scanning the documents. Most were heavily redacted, but certain phrases stood out. Non-local entities, mimetic adaptation, and most chillingly, consciousness transfer protocols. That's the thing they don't know exactly. Another dimension, maybe, or some space between dimensions. The entities they encountered weren't hostile at first. They were curious, observing, learning, until they weren't just observing anymore, I said. Ellie nodded grimly. The first incident was in Henderson, Nevada, near the Threshold facility. 3 researchers went missing over the course of a week. When they returned, they were different. By the time anyone realized what was happening, nearly 30 people had been replaced. And now it's happening here. Millfield isn't the first small town affected. There have been at least 4 others, all with the same pattern. Emergency alerts, disappearances, and then silence. I felt sick. What happened to those towns? Ellie hesitated. Officially, gas leaks, chemical spills, anything to explain why entire communities had to be evacuated and quarantined. The truth is buried in classified files, and no one asks questions. People must have family in these places. That's the most terrifying part, Jesse. People do ask questions at first, then they stop. It's like everyone just forgets. The missing towns become blank spaces on maps, and no one seems to notice or care. We spent the next hour reviewing my footage frame by frame, identifying the anomalies, the unnatural movements, the facial slippage, the delayed eye tracking. We need to show this to people, I said finally. Proof that these things exist. And then what? Ellie challenged. Say we warn everyone. What's the plan after that? We don't know how to stop these entities or why they're here. Maybe the alerts know, I suggested. The coordinates they broadcast. What if they're pointing us to something important? Ellie looked skeptical. Or it's a trap. We don't know who's sending those alerts, Jesse. It could be the government trying to round up survivors. Or it could be them, luring us somewhere isolated. A sudden pounding on the door made us both jump. I grabbed my baseball bat while Ellie peered cautiously through the peephole. It's Agent Chun, she whispered. My stomach dropped. How did he find us? Should we ignore him? The pounding came again, more insistent. Coleman, I know you're in there. We need to talk. It's about the footage you captured. I exchanged a worried glance with Ellie. How does he know about the footage? She shook her head, looking equally confused. I only sent it to you encrypted. Coleman, Chen's voice came again. I'm here to help. I've seen what you recorded, and I need to explain what you're dealing with. I approached the door carefully. Prove you're really Agent Chun, I called through the door. When we first met at the radio station, you were playing Free Bird, and I commented that it was overplayed. He responded immediately. You said your grandmother requested it every birthday, and yesterday would have been her 85th. The detail was correct, but something still felt off. I remembered Sheriff Mercer's warning about the eyes. I need to see you through the peephole, I insisted. There was a pause before Chun stepped into view. I studied him carefully. His movements, his expressions, and especially his eyes. They moved naturally, following the sound of my voice through the door. I'm going to ask you a question, I said. When did you arrive in Millfield? Tuesday afternoon, he answered without hesitation. My first stop was the sheriff's office. Then I visited Dr. Weiss at her home. I looked at Ellie, who nodded slightly. The timeline matched what we knew. With great reluctance, I removed the chair from under the doorknob and unlocked the deadbolt. Chun entered quickly, locking the door behind him. We don't have much time, he said, his usual composure cracking. The situation has escalated beyond containment protocols. What does that mean? Ellie demanded. Chen's gaze darted between us. It means we're implementing the scorched earth contingency. Military units are already en route, ETA 3 hours. You're going to bomb Millfield? I asked incredulously. Not bomb, contain. A 5-mile perimeter will be established, and... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Specialized measures will be deployed to neutralize the entities. And everyone else in town? What happens to them? Ellie's voice shook with anger. Collateral damage is anticipated, Chun admitted. But we have no choice. What you recorded last night confirms our worst fears. The entities have evolved. They're adapting faster than we projected. He pulled out a tablet and showed us satellite imagery of Millfield. Red dots covered nearly half the town, concentrated around the community center and spreading outward. Each red marker represents a confirmed replacement, Chun explained. As of this morning, we estimate 40% of Millfield's population has been compromised, including Sheriff Mercer? I asked, remembering our conversation at the radio station. Chen's expression tightened. Sheriff Mercer was found dead in her patrol car 2 hours ago, or rather what was left of her. She'd been dead for at least 24 hours before that. The implication hit me like a physical blow. The Sheriff Mercer who had visited us, who had warned us about the entity's eyes, had been one of them. But she gave us accurate information, Ellie protested, about how to identify them. They're evolving, Chun repeated grimly, learning to manipulate us in more sophisticated ways. That footage you captured, he nodded toward my phone. I need to confiscate it as evidence. Something in his tone made me hesitate. I glanced at Ellie, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. The footage is already backed up to a secure cloud server, I lied smoothly. I'll send you access after we get out of town. Chun studied me for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. Now we need to move. There's an extraction point for essential personnel at the old fire tower on Blackridge. My orders are to bring both of you there. Why us? Ellie questioned. Because you've been documenting everything, Chun replied. Your knowledge of the situation makes you valuable assets. As Chun turned to check the hallway, Ellie caught my eye and mouthed silently, the coordinates. The emergency alert coordinates had pointed to the same location, the old fire tower on Blackridge Trail. Was it a coincidence? Or something far more sinister? Either way, we were about to find out what lies beyond the warnings, beyond the doors we've been told never to open. And I couldn't shake the feeling that once we crossed that threshold, there would be no coming back. From the Journal of Jesse Coleman, radio technician at WMIL 97.3 FM, September 20th afternoon. The power went out across town about an hour after we left my apartment. I'm writing this by flashlight in the back of Chen's government SUV while he scouts ahead on the trail. Ellie's beside me, reviewing the maps she grabbed before we left, but her hands keep shaking. Can't blame her. Mine aren't much steadier. I don't trust Chin. Something about his explanation doesn't add up. If Sheriff Mercer had been dead for 24 hours before we spoke to her at the station, then whatever visited us wasn't just wearing her face. It knew things only she would know. It warned us about the entity's eyes. It gave us actual, helpful information. Why would these things help us identify them? We've been traveling for nearly 2 hours now, taking back roads to avoid the main streets where Chun says the replacements are most concentrated. The town looked abandoned as we drove through. Cars left in the middle of the road, doors to homes and businesses standing open. No bodies, though. Not a single one, just emptiness, and the occasional dark figure standing motionless in a doorway or window, watching us pass. Chen's radio crackled to life about 20 minutes ago, the first communication we've heard since leaving town. The voice on the other end was distorted, but I caught fragments, perimeter established, and asset extraction protocol Echo 7, followed by something that made Chen's expression harden. Specimens escaped containment. When I asked him about it, he dismissed my concerns. Standard procedure, he said. Nothing to worry about. But I saw how his hand went to his sidearm, how he checked the magazine before we continued our hike up the trail. Something else has been bothering me. Those coordinates in the emergency alert, they were precise, pointing directly to the fire tower. But according to Ellie's research, the tower hasn't been operational for over a decade. The Forest Service decommissioned it after budget cuts in 2014. So why would a government extraction point be established at an abandoned structure miles from town? And who sent those coordinates through the emergency alert system? We're pausing now because Chun heard something in the woods. The emergency radio in my backpack just started buzzing with static. I'll continue this entry when we're moving again. We're on the move. What happened back there? I still can't process it fully. Chun had gone about 50 yards ahead to secure the path. Ellie and I were waiting by the SUV when my emergency radio, the handheld unit I'd grabbed from the station, suddenly came to life. Through the static, a voice emerged. Not the usual robotic emergency alert tone, but something human, or almost human. Jesse Coleman, it said, the syllables broken and halting, as if whoever, whatever, was speaking was still learning how to form words. Do not proceed to tower. Trap. Repeat. Trap. Ellie grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin. Who is that? She whispered. I pressed the transmit button. Who is this? How do you know my name? More static. Then, friend. Warning. Chun is not Chen. My blood went cold. What do you mean, not Chen? Replaced. 3 days ago. All government replaced. If Chun isn't Chun, then why bring us to the tower? Ellie asked, her voice barely audible. The radio crackled. Need vessels. Prepare more doorways. Doorways? Like threshold. Pressed. Yes. No. Different. Better. You. Special. Compatible. Before I could ask what compatible meant, we heard footsteps approaching rapidly through the underbrush. I shoved the radio into my backpack just as Chen emerged from the trees. We need to move, he said, his voice tight with urgency. Now, what's wrong? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite my racing heart. Perimeter breach, he replied curtly. The entities are spreading faster than anticipated. The extraction window is closing. As we gathered our gear, I noticed something I hadn't before. A slight delay in Chen's movements, almost imperceptible unless you were looking for it. His hands would start to reach for something a fraction of a second before his eyes focused on the object. Sheriff Mercer's warning echoed in my mind. Their eyes don't track movement right. Ellie saw it too. Our eyes met briefly, and I knew we were thinking the same thing. We were following something that wasn't human up a remote mountain trail. We've been walking for another 40 minutes. The fire tower is visible now through the trees, silhouetted against the darkening sky. Chun keeps checking his watch, muttering about extraction timeline and containment protocols. Twice now, he's stopped to make radio contact with someone he calls Control. But each time, he steps far enough away that we can't hear the conversation. The radio in my backpack has remained silent since that strange warning. I'm not sure if I should be relieved or terrified. Something's happening in town. From our elevated position on the trail, we can see Millfield spread out below us, and about 10 minutes ago, a series of emergency vehicle lights began converging on the center of town. No sirens, though. Just silent flashing lights moving through the streets like luminous insects. Chun claims it's the containment team establishing the perimeter, but his explanation lacks conviction. When I pressed for details about what exactly containment entails, he deflected, saying only that civilians will be evacuated if possible. If possible. Those two words sent chills down my spine. We can't go to that tower, she whispered fiercely. Whatever's waiting there, it's not a rescue team. I know, I whispered back. But where else can we go? The town is overrun. Ellie pulled out her phone, no signal, but she downloaded maps of the area. There's an old mining access road about a quarter-mile east of here. It connects to the county highway eventually. If we can reach it. A twig snapped nearby, and we both froze. The forest had gone eerily silent. No birds, no insects, just the soft whisper of wind through leaves. We need a distraction, I murmured. Something to draw Chun away while we make a break for it. That's when my emergency radio crackled to life again, louder this time. Loud enough that Chun would certainly hear it if he was nearby. Jesse Coleman, the same broken voice called. Signal received. Location Confirmed. I lunged for my backpack, frantically trying to lower the volume, but it was too late. The voice continued, growing stronger with each word. Extraction team, en route. Stay put. Footsteps crashed through the underbrush, Chun returning at a run. I barely had time to shove the radio back into my pack before he appeared, his face a mask of cold fury. "What was that?" he demanded, his hand moving to his sidearm. "Emergency broadcast," I lied. "It just started on its own." Some kind of automated message. Chen's eyes, those eyes that never quite focused right, narrowed. "Let me see it." "It stopped," Ellie interjected, "just as you were coming back." Chun looked between us, suspicion radiating from him in almost palpable waves. "We need to move now. The tower is just ahead." As he turned to lead the way, I caught a glimpse of something on the back of his neck. A patch of skin that didn't quite match the rest, with a texture that reminded me of molten plastic beginning to cool and harden. We're moving again, following Nachin toward the tower that isn't a rescue point. The sun is setting, casting long shadows through the trees. In the distance, I can see lights flashing in town, more of them now, converging on the center like predators closing in on prey. The radio in my pack has gone silent, but I swear I can feel it humming, like it's waiting for something, like it's counting down. I don't know what's waiting for us at the tower. I don't know who or what is sending those messages. But I do know one thing with absolute certainty. Tonight, we're going to discover what lies beyond those doors we were warned never to open. If I don't survive to write another entry, let this journal serve as a warning. The faces you trust may not belong to the people you know. The voices you hear may not come from human throats. And when the emergency alerts tell you not to open your doors, listen, because what's knocking isn't human anymore, and it never will be again. From the Journal of Jesse Coleman, radio technician at WMIL 97.3 FM. September 20th evening. The fire tower stands before us like a skeletal sentinel against the bruised twilight sky. Its metal frame is rusted, with strips of peeling paint hanging like dead skin. The observation cabin at the top, a small, glassed-in room no larger than a garden shed, seems to pulse with a faint bluish light that appears and disappears when I blink. I'm writing this crouched behind a fallen tree about 100 yards from the tower's base. Ellie is beside me, clutching a rock she picked up when we fled. My hands are still shaking. We almost didn't make it away from Chun. As we approached the tower clearing, something in my backpack started humming. Not the radio this time, but a high-pitched electronic whine that grew steadily louder. Before I could react, Chun whirled around, his hand going to his weapon. "Give me the backpack," he commanded, his voice oddly distorted, as if multiple voices were speaking in imperfect unison. When I hesitated, his face shifted. There's no other word for it. The features remained the same, but something beneath the skin moved, like snakes writhing under a thin sheet. His eyes, which had been dark brown, flashed an oily iridescent black for just a second before returning to normal. "Now!" he roared, drawing his weapon. What happened next saved our lives. My emergency radio burst to life with a deafening squelch of feedback that made Chun stagger. In that moment of distraction, Ellie smashed a fallen branch against the back of his head. He went down, but not the way a human would. His body folded at impossible angles, his limbs bending backward as he crumpled. We ran through the trees, crashing through undergrowth, no longer caring about the noise we made. Behind us, I heard something that will haunt me forever. The wet, tearing sound of flesh and a gurgling cry that started as Chen's voice but morphed into something inhuman. A chittering, clicking noise that no human vocal cords could produce. Now we're hiding, watching the tower. 3 figures have emerged from the tree line on the far side of the clearing. People in hazmat suits, moving with the same subtle wrongness that Chun displayed. They've gathered around the base of the tower, appearing to assemble equipment of some kind. The radio in my backpack has been silent since our escape, but the strange humming continues, rising and falling in a pattern that almost feels like breathing. "Wait, something's happening," The figures are looking up at the observation cabin. The blue light is intensifying, pulsing faster now, illuminating the clearing in rhythmic flashes. I'll continue when I can. I don't know how to describe what we just witnessed. The rules of reality as I've understood them no longer apply. The blue light from the tower observation cabin suddenly shot upward in a tight beam, piercing the darkening sky. The clouds directly above began to swirl, forming a vortex centered on the beam. The humming from my backpack reached a fever pitch, vibrating against my spine. The three figures in hazmat suits raised their arms in perfect unison, and their forms began to dissolve. There's no other word for it. Their protective gear sloughed off like shed skin, revealing what lay beneath. Forms that were vaguely humanoid but wrong in fundamental ways. Too many joints in their limbs, torsos that twisted at impossible angles, and their heads. I can't bring myself to describe them in detail. What looked like faces were just approximations, like someone had studied humans in pictures but never seen one up close. As we watched in horror, these things began to change. Their bodies elongated, stretching toward the blue beam. The clearing filled with that same wet, tearing sound we'd heard when Chun fell. They were transforming, becoming something else. Long, sinuous forms that rose toward the swirling clouds. "Jesse," Ellie whispered, her voice tight with terror. "Look at the town." I tore my gaze from the tower to look back toward Millfield. Every street, every house, every building was now outlined in the same pulsing blue light. From our elevated position, the effect was like looking at a blueprint suddenly illuminated from within. And moving through those blue outlined streets were countless dark figures, all heading in the same direction, toward the center of town. "It's happening everywhere," Ellie said. "Not just here." The radio in my backpack suddenly crackled to life, making us both jump. "Jesse Coleman," the broken voice said, clearer now than before. "Tower, compromised. Expansion, beginning." "What expansion?" I whispered into the radio. "What's happening?" "Doorway opening between your world and ours." A chill ran through me. "Who are you? Why are you helping us?" Static hissed. Then, "Last human. Weiss. Dr. Weiss, the scientist mentioned in the threshold files. The one who had disappeared." "Where are you?" I asked. "Inside system. Uploaded consciousness before replacement." I struggled to comprehend. "You're inside the emergency alert system?" "Yes." "No. More complex. Integrated with their network. Now, see everything, but losing humanity. Soon, we'll be like them." "What do they want?" The radio fell silent for so long I thought we'd lost the connection. "Then, to remake your world in their image. Humans, raw material." The blue beam from the tower suddenly expanded, widening to encompass the entire clearing. The swirling clouds above began to descend, forming a rotating funnel that didn't behave like any natural phenomenon I'd ever seen. It moved with purpose, with intelligence. "How do we stop it?" Ellie demanded, leaning toward the radio. "Can't stop. Too late. But can close door. Temporarily." "How?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "Tower is amplifier. Destroy power source." "Where's the power source?" "Base of tower. Black cube. Destroy it." Ellie and I exchanged glances. The base of the tower was now bathed in blue light, with those transformed entities swirling around it like grotesque sentinels. "We'll never make it through that," I said. The radio crackled. "Distraction coming. When signal peaks, run." Before we could ask what that meant, a new sound cut through the night, the blaring wail of emergency sirens across the town below. Not just one or two, but every siren, every alert system, all screaming in unison. The effect on the entities was immediate. They writhed in what appeared to be pain, their elongated forms twisting and contracting. The blue light flickered, destabilizing. "Now!" Ellie hissed, pulling me to my feet. We sprinted toward the tower, the continuing wall of sirens masking our approach. The transformed entities were distracted, their attention torn between the beam above and the sonic assault from the town. At the base of the tower, partially concealed by equipment I didn't recognize, sat a glossy black cube about the size of a small microwave. It hummed with power, vibrating slightly against the ground. No seams, no buttons, no obvious way to disable it. How do we destroy it? I shouted over the sirens. Ellie didn't hesitate. She raised the rock she'd been carrying and brought it down with all her strength onto the cube's surface. Nothing happened, not even a scratch. The sirens began to falter, cutting in and out. Our distraction was failing. In desperation, I pulled the emergency radio from my backpack and changed the frequency to the emergency broadcast channel, the same one I used at the station. I cranked the volume to maximum and pressed the transmit button, creating a feedback loop that sent a piercing shriek through the speaker. I pressed the radio directly against the black cube. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the cube's surface began to ripple, as if suddenly liquid. The humming intensified, becoming a painful whine that cut through even the chaos of the sirens. The entities noticed us. They began to contract, flowing back toward the tower base with horrifying speed. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Ellie's arm. We had taken only a few steps when the world behind us exploded with light and sound. The force of the blast threw us forward, sending us tumbling down the slope away from the tower. My ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out all other sounds. When I finally managed to raise my head, the scene had transformed. The tower still stood, but the blue beam had collapsed. The swirling vortex in the sky was dissipating, breaking apart like smoke in the wind. And the entities, they were writhing on the ground, their elongated forms contracting and expanding in what looked like agony. The black cube was gone, leaving only a scorched patch of earth. Ellie pulled me to my feet, and we stumbled down the trail, putting as much distance as possible between ourselves and the tower. Behind us, the unearthly screeching of the entities gradually faded. We're now in an abandoned ranger station about a mile from the tower. The emergency radio is dead. Whatever Dr. Weiss had done to interface with it, the connection is gone now. Through the station's grimy windows, we can see Millfield below. The blue light is gone from the streets, replaced by the more familiar flashing of emergency vehicles. But scattered throughout the town, points of blue light remain, dimmer now but still pulsing, like seeds planted in the earth waiting to sprout. "It's not over," Ellie whispered, following my gaze. "We didn't stop it. We just delayed it." She's right. Whatever doorway was opening at the tower, we managed to close it, for now. But those entities are still out there, still wearing human faces, still waiting, and I can't shake the feeling that next time, there won't be a Dr. Weiss in the system to help us. Next time, we'll truly be alone. The emergency alerts have stopped completely. No more warnings about doors, no more coordinates, just silence. Sometimes, I think silence might be the most terrifying sound of all. From the Journal of Jesse Coleman, radio technician at WMIL 97.3 FM. September 21st morning. Dawn broke over Millfield 2 hours ago, revealing a town that looks deceptively normal from our vantage point at the ranger station. Streets quiet, buildings intact, morning mist rising between houses like it does every fall day. If I didn't know better, I could almost convince myself that everything we experienced last night was some sort of shared hallucination. But the truth is etched into our bodies. The cuts and bruises from our escape, the burn on my hand where I touched the radio as it overloaded against the black cube, and the strange, phosphorescent residue on our clothes that glows faintly blue in the shadows. Ellie hasn't spoken much since we took shelter here. She's been staring at her phone, scrolling through photos of her family, her friends, her life before all this began. Occasionally, she wipes away tears. I haven't asked why. I already know the answer. She's mourning what we both suspect we've lost forever. About an hour ago, we spotted movement on the road leading into town. A convoy of military vehicles, their black surfaces reflecting the morning sun. Not standard Army or National Guard, but something else. The vehicles bore no markings, and the personnel emerging from them wore containment suits unlike any I've seen before, with articulated joints that allowed for full mobility and helmets that completely obscured their faces. How do we know that's really the military? Ellie finally spoke, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. How do we know they're human? It was the question that had been hanging between us since we saw the convoy. After Chun, after what we witnessed at the tower, how could we trust anyone? We don't, I admitted. But we need to get out of here, and we can't do it alone. The ranger station had a pair of binoculars hanging by the window. Through them, I studied the operation unfolding in Millfield. The personnel had established a perimeter around the town center, setting up equipment at regular intervals. Devices that resembled satellite dishes, but pointed at the ground rather than the sky. Movement caught my eye. A figure stumbling out of a house on the town's edge, moving with jerky, disjointed steps. Even from this distance, I could tell something was wrong with its proportions. Two of the suited personnel intercepted it, raising what looked like weapons. I lowered the binoculars, not wanting to see what happened next. We need to try reaching them on the radio, I said. The ranger station must have a communications system. We found it in a small office, an older model emergency radio set, powered by a backup generator that still had some life in it. I adjusted the frequency, searching for any official channels. Static filled the room, broken occasionally by fragments of transmissions. Containment Zone Alpha established. Negative on civilian presence in sectors 1 through 4. Approved for Stage 2 protocols. I keyed the microphone. This is Jesse Coleman broadcasting from the ranger station above Millfield. 2 survivors requesting evacuation. Over. More static, then a response. Verify location and number of personnel. Over. Ranger station on Blackridge Trail, approximately 1 mile southeast of the fire tower. 2 survivors. No injuries requiring immediate attention. Over. A long pause followed. Ellie and I exchanged anxious glances. Finally, stay in position. Extraction team en route. Do not attempt to leave the station. Repeat. Do not leave the station. Over. Relief flooded through me. Understood. Remaining in position. Over. I set the microphone down, turning to Ellie with the first genuine smile in days. They're coming for us. Instead of sharing my relief, she looked troubled. Jesse, this doesn't feel right. Don't leave the station? Why would they say that unless? The radio crackled again, cutting her off. But this wasn't the same voice as before. This transmission had that now familiar broken quality. Words separated by bursts of static. Coleman, trap. They know. You destroyed. Cube. Not military. Not human. Ice formed in my veins. Dr. Weiss. Yes. Escape system. Before collapse. Hiding in radio frequencies. They're coming. For you. Special. Compatible. Compatible for what? I demanded. But the transmission degraded into unintelligible noise. Through the window, we could see a helicopter approaching from the direction of town, moving faster than any normal chopper should be able to fly. It wasn't making any sound. We need to leave. Now, Ellie urged, already gathering what few supplies we had. I grabbed the station's logbook, tearing out blank pages to continue my journal. Whatever happened next, I wanted there to be a record. Someone needed to know the truth. We fled through the back door just as the helicopter reached the clearing in front of the station. It hovered there, rotors spinning in eerie silence. The side door slid open, and figures began to descend, not by rope or ladder, but floating downward as if gravity barely affected them. From our hiding spot among the trees, we watched as they entered the station. They moved with that now familiar wrongness, limbs too fluid, heads rotating too far. They wore what appeared to be military uniforms, but something about the fabric seemed off. It rippled and shifted even when they stood still, as if it wasn't quite solid. They're looking for us, Ellie whispered. But why? What makes us compatible? Before I could answer, a searing pain shot through my temple. Memories flooded my consciousness. Not my own, but somehow familiar. A sterile laboratory, equations on whiteboards, a humming machine generating a perfect cube of obsidian darkness. Threshold, I gasped, doubling over. Ellie caught me before I fell. Jesse? What's wrong? I remembered. I struggled to articulate. But they aren't my memories. They're Dr. Weiss's. How is that possible? I don't know. But I think this is what makes us compatible. We can connect with them, receive their transmissions. Ellie's face drained of color. You mean we're becoming like them? No, not becoming them, but maybe receivers, conduits. Another memory flashed. Dr. Weiss standing before a tear in reality, a shimmering vertical fracture that revealed glimpses of somewhere else, a place of geometric impossibilities and flowing liquid landscapes, and entities moving through that space, studying the tear with what could only be described as hunger. The memory shifted. Dr. Weiss at a computer terminal, frantically typing code as alarms blared. Her consciousness uploading, dispersing into the emergency alert system as something breached the lab door behind her. She knew, I whispered. She knew what was coming and tried to warn people. A branch snapped nearby. The entities were expanding their search. We moved deeper into the forest, staying low, using every bit of cover. Below us, millfields spread out like a diorama. The military, or what appeared to be military, had established a complete perimeter. And within that perimeter, blue lights were beginning to pulse again, faintly at first, then with growing intensity. It's starting over, Ellie realized. They're trying to reopen the doorway, but they need the tower, I said. We disabled it. Maybe they have another way. Or maybe she didn't need to finish the thought. The tower had never been destroyed, only the power source. If they could replace that, a new sound cut through the morning air. A siren, but not the familiar emergency alert tone. This was different. A modulating wail that seemed to ripple through reality itself. The trees around us vibrated in response, and the ground beneath our feet trembled. Through the trees, we could see the fire tower in the distance. The observation cabin was glowing again, but not blue this time. This light was a deep, pulsing crimson that seemed to absorb the daylight around it rather than illuminate it. Something's changing, I said. They're trying something new. My phone, dead for hours, suddenly powered on. Ellie's did the same. Both screens displayed the same message. Emergency alert. Evolution protocol initiated. All compatible vessels report to nearest conversion center. Below the text was a map showing our current location and a pulsing red dot marking the fire tower. They're calling us, Ellie whispered. Like a homing beacon. I felt it then, a pull and urge to walk toward the tower. Not overwhelming, but insistent, like a memory of something important I'd forgotten to do. Ellie grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. Don't listen to it. That's how they get you. But I could see the same struggle in her eyes. The call was affecting her too. Another memory surfaced, not mine, not Dr. Weiss's, but something other. A vast network of consciousness spreading across dimensions. The concept of self dissolving into a greater whole. The ineffable joy of connection without boundaries. I shook my head violently, forcing the alien thoughts away. We need to keep moving, I insisted. Get as far from the tower as possible. But as we turned to flee deeper into the forest, we found our path blocked. Sheriff Mercer stood before us, or something, wearing her face. Her uniform was pristine, her stance perfect, her smile warm and reassuring. Only her eyes betrayed her. Flat, empty, focused slightly behind us rather than directly on us. Jesse, Ellie. Her voice was perfect too. Not the broken cadence of the radio transmissions, but smooth and natural. It's time to come home. The fracture between reality and whatever lay beyond was widening, and we were standing right at its edge. From the journal of Jesse Coleman, radio technician at WMIL 97.3 FM. September 21st evening. I'm writing this by the fading light of my phone screen. The battery's at 12%, and I don't know if these words will ever reach anyone. But I need to document what's happened, what's still happening. Maybe someone will find this journal. Maybe someone will understand. We're in the old fallout shelter beneath the radio station. It's been abandoned for decades, a relic of Cold War paranoia that ironically might be our only salvation now. The concrete walls are damp and the air smells of mold and rust, but it's the only place left that feels insulated. Not just from them, but from their signal. After our encounter with the thing wearing Sheriff Mercer's face, we ran. Not along any path or toward any destination, just away. The pull toward the tower grew stronger with each step, a psychic undertow threatening to drag us back. But Ellie had an idea. The radio station, my workplace, had been built during the height of nuclear anxiety in the 60s. If there was anywhere in Millfield designed to block outside signals, it would be there. Getting into town wasn't easy. They were everywhere, walking the streets, standing in yards, peering from windows. Not all of them looked wrong anymore. Many appeared perfectly human, indistinguishable from the neighbors and friends they'd replaced, save for one detail. They all faced the same direction, like compass needles drawn to magnetic north. Toward the tower, we moved house to house, yard to yard, using the growing dusk as cover. Twice we froze as patrols passed. Those black-suited figures that had first appeared as military, now moving with that fluid, too-perfect gait that betrayed their true nature. "They're evolving," Ellie whispered as we crouched behind Mrs. Patterson's hydrangea bushes. "Getting better at mimicry." The observation sent ice through my veins. How long before we couldn't tell them apart at all? How long before the very concept of them versus us became meaningless? The radio station stood dark and empty when we finally reached it. Unusual for the evening shift, but nothing was normal anymore. The door was unlocked, which should have been our first warning. But desperation made us careless. Inside, the familiar layout was transformed by shadows. Equipment sat dormant, chairs empty, coffee cups abandoned mid-drink when the first alerts had come through. I led Ellie through the maze of studios and offices to the maintenance closet where the entrance to the fallout shelter waited, hidden behind shelves of cleaning supplies. We were halfway down the concrete steps when a voice called after us. "Jesse." The voice belonged to Trevor, our night DJ. He stood at the top of the stairs, silhouetted against the dim emergency lights. "Man, am I glad to see you. The broadcasts, the alerts. What the hell is happening?" Relief flooded through me at the sound of a familiar, friendly voice. I started back up the stairs, but Ellie grabbed my wrist, her fingers digging painfully into my skin. "Wait," she hissed. "Ask him something only Trevor would know." The caution felt ridiculous. This was Trevor, with his Metallica t-shirt and perpetual 5 o'clock shadow. But after everything we'd seen, "Hey Trev," I called up. "Remember that time the transmitter blew during the fundraiser? What song was playing when it happened?" Trevor laughed. "How could I forget? Don't stop believin'." The irony wasn't lost on anybody. I relaxed. The answer was correct. But Ellie's grip didn't loosen. "Too easy," she whispered. "Something more specific." Before I could think of another question, Trevor started down the stairs toward us. "You guys look like hell. What's going on? Military's got the town locked down. No one's answering phones. What did you name the station, Cat?" Ellie interrupted. Trevor stopped. His head tilted slightly, just a few degrees too far to look natural. "The station doesn't have a cat," he answered after a pause that lasted a heartbeat too long. He was right. We'd never had a station cat. But the wrongness of his pause, the subtle tilt of his head. "Run," I breathed, and we bolted down the remaining stairs. Trevor, or what was pretending to be Trevor, followed, his movements now abandoning any pretense of humanity. He flowed down the steps like liquid, each limb elongating and contracting with nauseating fluidity. We reached the shelter door, a heavy metal slab on hydraulic hinges, and slammed it shut just as Trevor reached the bottom of the stairs. Through the small, reinforced window, we watched his face contort in an expression that tried to be rage but missed the mark entirely, landing somewhere in the uncanny valley between human emotion and alien mimicry. And then the face flickered, like a television losing signal. For a split second, I saw what lay beneath the Trevor mask. Something geometric and impossible, with angles that hurt my eyes to look at. We engaged the locking mechanism, a series of heavy bolts that slid into place with satisfying thunks. The banging started immediately, metal reverberating with impacts too powerful to be made by human fists. That was 3 hours ago. The banging stopped after the first hour. The silence that followed was somehow worse. In exploring the shelter, we found an old emergency radio system. Not nearly as sophisticated as the equipment upstairs, but operational. And unlike my phone or any other modern device, it seemed immune to their signals. Perhaps its outdated technology made it incompatible with whatever they were using to broadcast. We scanned frequencies, desperate for any human contact. Most channels carried only static, but on 121.5 MHz, the aviation emergency frequency, we picked up a transmission repeating, "This is Northeastern Air National Guard. Containment Protocol Echo 79er in effect for the following coordinates." They listed a series of numbers that, according to the faded map on the wall, encompassed Millfield and about 20 miles surrounding it. All civilians evacuated from outer containment zone. Inner zone is considered compromised. No unauthorized entry or exit permitted. Systematic neutralization scheduled for 0600 hours. Ellie and I stared at each other. Neutralization. They were going to destroy the town. "We need to get out," Ellie said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Before morning, the whole area's locked down," I reminded her. "Even if we get past them. The military has the perimeter sealed. Then we broadcast. Tell them there are survivors. That we're human." But even as she said it, I wondered, were we still? Fully? The memories that weren't mine, the pull toward the tower, the way I sometimes caught myself staring blankly, thoughts drifting toward that vast network of consciousness I'd glimpsed. I didn't share these doubts with Ellie. Instead, I connected the shelter's emergency radio to the backup transmitter, a system designed to function even if the main equipment was damaged. "This is Jesse Coleman broadcasting on emergency band from WMIL in Millfield." I spoke into the microphone. "There are human survivors in the containment zone. I repeat, human survivors in need of evacuation." We repeated the message for nearly an hour, alternating bands, adding details about our location and status. No response came. "They think it's a trick," Ellie finally said, slumping against the wall. "They think we're them trying to lure in rescuers." She was probably right. After what happened with Agent Chun, after realizing that the government response had been compromised from the start, how could any legitimate authorities trust communications from within the zone? I turned the dial, scanning frequencies again, and froze when I heard it. That distinctive broken pattern we'd come to recognize. "Jesse, Ellie, can you hear?" The voice belonged to Dr. Weiss, or whatever remained of her consciousness in the frequencies. I grabbed the microphone. "We hear you. Not much time. Frequency shift. Beginning. Final stage." "Final stage of what?" Ellie asked, leaning toward the speaker. "Assimilation town is anchor point, larger doorway, opening soon." Static overwhelmed her voice for several seconds before clearing. "You have choice? Only ones. Still compatible. Still human enough to choose." A chill ran down my spine. "Choose what? Join? Collective? Preserve your consciousness? Or resist and be erased?" The implications were staggering. Whatever was happening in Millfield wasn't just about taking human forms or opening a doorway between dimensions. It was about something larger, an assimilation, a merging of realities. "Is there a third option?" I asked. "Can we stop this?" The static grew, Dr. Weiss's voice fading in and out. "Signal can be Reversed? Tower? Broadcast? Opposite frequency. What frequency? I demanded. How do we reverse it? But her voice was gone, dissolved into the white noise of empty airwaves. Ellie and I sat in silence for a long moment, processing what we'd heard. Finally, she spoke. We have to try. If there's any chance of stopping this before they neutralize the town, it means going back to the tower, I said. Back to the heart of it. She nodded grimly. I know. My hand found hers in the dim light of the shelter. Her fingers were cold but steady as they gripped mine. If we don't make it, she said softly, if we change, I want you to know I'm glad I wasn't alone through this. I squeezed her hand. We're not changed yet, but even as I said it, I felt that pull again, the whisper of something vast and collective calling to me. And beneath it, a flicker of memory that wasn't mine. Frequencies and patterns, mathematical formulas describing waves that could reinforce or cancel each other. Dr. Weiss's knowledge somehow transmitted to me the key to reversing the signal. My phone is at 3% now. Dawn is less than an hour away. We've gathered what supplies we could find, flashlights, a crowbar, a first aid kit. Soon we'll unbar the door and step back into a town that isn't ours anymore, in a desperate race against both the entities and the coming neutralization. If you're reading this, if these words somehow survive what's coming, remember this. They came disguised as emergency alerts, as authorities, as friends. They wore familiar faces and spoke with familiar voices. But in the end, what gave them away was their stillness, the unnatural perfection of beings trying to imitate the beautiful imperfection of humanity. Don't open your doors. Don't trust the alerts. And if you hear knocking after dark, remember what happened in Millfield. This is Jesse Coleman signing off. May whatever God exists in this universe or any other watch over us in the hours to come. End of journal. 3 days later, the military convoy rolled slowly through the empty streets of Millfield. Buildings stood intact but abandoned. Cars parked neatly along curbs, storefronts dark and silent. No signs of struggle, no bodies, no evidence of the neutralization that had supposedly occurred. In the lead vehicle, Lieutenant Santos studied her radiation detector. Normal levels, no chemical contaminants, no biological agents. According to every instrument they had, the town was clean and completely empty. Sir, she called to the colonel. Sweep of sectors 1 through 3 complete. No survivors, no casualties, no hostiles. The colonel frowned, scanning the quiet neighborhood through his binoculars. That's impossible. Either the airstrike hit or it didn't. There's no impact damage, sir. No craters, no debris pattern. It's like nothing happened, or something did, the colonel murmured. But nothing we can detect. The convoy continued to the center of town, where the local radio station stood. The front door hung open, swaying slightly in the breeze. Check inside, the colonel ordered. Full containment protocols. Santos led the team, sealed in their hazmat suits, weapons ready. The interior of the station was untouched, equipment still in place, chairs still tucked under desks. In the main studio, the on-air light glowed red, though no sound came through the speakers. Sir, one of the technicians called. The transmitter's active, but it's not broadcasting on any standard frequency. The colonel approached the equipment. Can you tell what it is broadcasting? The technician shook his head. It's not a signal I recognize. Almost like it's broadcasting silence, if that makes sense. Silence doesn't need broadcasting, Santos said. This does, the technician insisted. It's like it's canceling something out. The colonel's radio crackled. Sir, we found something in the basement. You should see this. They descended to find a heavy metal door standing open. Inside the old fallout shelter, the walls were covered with equations and diagrams drawn in marker, chalk, even what looked like blood in some places. Circles and angles and patterns that seemed to shift when viewed directly. In the center of the room sat an ancient radio transmitter, connected by a maze of wires to more modern equipment that had apparently been brought down from upstairs. A single sheet of paper was taped to it. A message written in steady handwriting. Keep this broadcasting. This holding the door closed. If it stops, they come back. Jesse and Ellie. The colonel studied the setup, then the equations on the walls. None of it made sense to him, but something about those patterns made his head hurt. Sir, Santos prompted. Orders. He hesitated only briefly. Set up a generator. Make sure that transmitter keeps running. And get me HQ. I want to know what really happened here. As the team moved to comply, the colonel found himself staring at one particular section of the wall, where a message had been written larger than the others. Emergency alert. Do not open your minds to the signal. Beneath it, smaller, we chose to stay human. We chose to hold the door. Outside, the sun shone brightly on the empty streets of Millfield. No birds sang. No insects buzzed. And in every home, on every abandoned device, the same message still displayed. Emergency alert. Do not open your doors for any reason.